Okay, fantastic. So welcome. I'm Tamara Ecker, Managing Director for British American Business in New York, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to today's session, which will explore the cultural differences in business attitudes towards racial inclusion and diversity across the US and the UK. This session is part of British American Business's larger diversity, equity, and inclusion series called the STIR. And for those of you not familiar with British American Business, we are the leading transatlantic trade association supporting businesses with operations in the US and the UK. So we have about an hour together and it will be packed. We'll spend the first roughly 10 minutes reviewing the findings from a survey our good friends at Engaging Business conducted, which breaks down workplace happiness by various demographics and draws on the input of over 1,200 employees working for both British and American companies. These results will set the backdrop for our panel discussion directly following with IND leaders across the US and UK, who will discuss how we can glean a better understanding of and improve the ways we address racial equality in business. And of course, we will also leave time for questions. I'd now like to welcome British American Business's CEO, Duncan Edwards, to introduce the founder of Engaging Business, Lord Mark Price.
Thanks, Tamara, and hello, everyone. Yes, I kind of wanted to squeeze myself into this program to introduce Lord Mark Price. Mark and I have known each other for, I guess, more than 20 years. I first got to know Mark when he was marketing director of UK supermarket group Waitrose. He then became the managing director of that company and the deputy chairman of its owner, the John Lewis Partnership. Since leaving JLP, he's had this stunningly interesting kind of second career. He's been a government minister for trade. He's an author and a columnist, mainly writing about how to create happiness in the workplace. But he's also written a book about chess. And he's the founder of Engaging Business, which is, he'll tell us more about, but it's a platform to facilitate employee engagement. And I'm thrilled that he's with us today, where he's done the Engaging Business have produced a survey looking at differences, as Tamara said, in attitudes and cultural differences in regarding race and ethnicity in the workplace. And Mark, it's great to have you with us. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Duncan, and everybody else. And thank you very much for inviting me. And thank you for the introduction as well. I feel very tired now. What I wanted to say, just to build on that introduction a little, to give you some context to why I'm going to be speaking about workplace engagement and happiness and diversity particularly, is that I spent 30 years working for the John Lewis Partnership. Now, what's unique about the John Lewis Partnership is its founder, almost 100 years ago, said the supreme purpose of the organization should be the happiness of the people that work there. And so I spent 30 years trying to work out in practical terms, what does it mean to be happy at work? When I left, I built the digital platform called Workall for Individuals. And in addition to that, Workall Engaging Business to work with businesses to measure, track and improve engagement at work. And if you can put up the first slide, I just want to spend a moment or two on the methodology. So as I said, I spent 30 years trying to understand on the next slide what actually drove workplace happiness. And these are really tangible things. The first thing I want to say is this is not some sort of, loose exercise in what makes people happy. The things that drive happiness are a reward and recognition, being paid fairly and recognized for what you do, information sharing, whether you have the information to do your job well, whether information is shared with you, a feeling of empowerment, well-being, that your organization cares for your well-being, instilling pride, having pride in your organization, jobs and job satisfaction. So we've built a digital survey. It's been running now for 3 years. It's been taken by hundreds of thousands of individuals in 120 countries. And what I've done for this research, or what I should say, what my team have done for this research, is pull together surveys from 26,000 plus individual employees. But within that, we've also got 1,200, slightly more responses from employees of British American business companies. So in total, there are 99 of your businesses in the British American Business Network that we have data on, because individuals in your organisations have come to work or they filled in the survey. So it's those results I want to share with you now, the overall results and the American business results. So on the next slide, to start with, to give you some context to where the results sit, what I wanted to share is the global results. So at the moment, overall workplace happiness as measured against those 6 areas is 70.4%. That's an increase on a year ago, as I'll talk about in a few minutes' time. The highest scoring area is empowerment at 71.4%. And this has seen a big increase over the last year. And it's to do with the fact that more people have been working from home, management have needed to trust and empower people more, and employees have responded well to that. The worst scoring area is well-being, but there's some good news even within that. When we ask the question, does your manager care for your well-being? Overwhelmingly, people have scored that question up over the last year. What holds well-being back is concerns about their job, anxiousness. Pre-COVID, that was about, will I have a job? Post-COVID, it's about what are the impacts of COVID going to be on my job? So those are the overall scores that we get from our global audience. On the next slide, you'll see how those scores break down. And I've given you 3 things. We measure age, we measure gender, we measure ethnicity. We also measure sexual orientation, and we measure disability. But for the purposes of this report, which runs to 77 pages, I've not added those in. Now, before you start to worry, I'm not going to go through 77 slides. I've tried to distill that report down into about 9 slides. So the only thing I want to say on age, because you'll have a chance to read the report and delve into it in more detail if you should want to, is that by and large, the older you are, the happier you are in work. There are a few exceptions. If you are under 29 and you are in a non-management job at the moment, you are less happy than those in a management job. Now that's really unusual. You don't see that in any other group. And it says something, I think, to the support under 29s in management are getting at the moment. The other group that I should pull out is the 45 to 54-year-old group, and white employees in that group are significantly less happy than other groups. And that's something I think to do with career change. On gender, it's neck and neck. It's now women are slightly happier at work. Last year it was men, women dropped back last year through COVID, year before it was women. And then in terms of ethnicity, you'll see that globally, Asian employees score highest, then white employees, then Black African Caribbean, mixed and multi-ethnicity, and then last Arabic employees. So that gives you a feel for how ethnicity breaks down in terms of these scores globally. On the next slide, what I've tried to do then is look at that by each of those 6 questions. So how do the scores stack up for reward and recognition, information sharing, well-being, instilling pride, job satisfaction, and empowerment? And what you can see is that there are a few areas here where Black respondents and mixed multi-ethnic respondents score less well. And I just want to take a moment to pull out which questions within these areas Black respondents are scoring less highly on. In reward, it's not about pay. The score that's dragging this down for Black respondents is, I am recognised when I do something well, and that scores 65%. So there's an issue with acknowledging performance from Black employees and from mixed multi-ethnic employees. The second area is on information sharing, where Black and African employees are third. There are 2 questions in here where the scores are less good. The first is, information is openly shared with me. There is a feeling that information, although given to other employees, isn't shared as well with Black or mixed race employees. And the other area in here that scores far less well is my views are heard. There's a feeling that other ethnicities are able to have their views heard far more clearly than Black respondents. And then the last area I want to pull out is in empowerment. And the score or the question that really pulls back Black and mixed race respondents again is I'm trusted to make decisions, and that's 67%. And that isn't to do with training. We ask a question about training and whether people have what they need to do their job well. And actually, Black and mixed race ethnicities score that question incredibly highly, 73%, and much higher than white or Asian respondents. So there are some things in here that are good, where Black respondents, mixed race respondents score highly, but it's those three things that I would draw out for you where the scores are noticeably less good. Recognise when doing something well, information being openly shared and views heard, and being trusted to make decisions. So that's the global context. And I just want to show you the differences between the UK and the USA. And I've got that in a couple of slides. So overall, I don't know if this is going to be a surprise to you, the scores from the UK across that 26,000 respondents are higher in the UK than they are in the USA. It was the same last year, but funny enough, the year before, the USA slightly tipped ahead of the UK. So these scores do move around year on year, but the UK was 3.2% higher. The biggest difference was around reward and recognition. And the third, or the least smallest gap was around job satisfaction, where it was 1.2%. Now, if you want to know why there's that big difference, I've pulled out the answers to three questions that are really driving those scores and the big differences. The first is, I'm happy with my working hours. In the UK, people are scoring that at 73%, but it's 65% in the USA. The second is, I have the information I need to do my job well. 74% in the UK, 68% in the USA, and I'm happy with my working environment is the last of the three. 72% in the UK, 67% in the USA. So when you see the pack and you see the question sets, you'll no doubt pull out other things which will be relevant to you and your organisations. But at a headline level, those were the three things that were driving the biggest gap between workplace happiness in the UK and the USA. On the next slide, I've got the scores for gender and for age. On gender, what you'll see here is that female employees are happier in the UK by quite a big margin. Male employees in the UK are happier, but you'll see that it's female employees that are dragging the score down in America in terms of their happiness in the workplace. Some really odd things have been going on over the last year with the scores recorded from female employees. A lot of it, we think, from the qualitative data we get, is driven by women feeling that over the last year through COVID, they've had all the responsibilities of caring at home predominantly, coupled with obviously the pressures that have come of working and managing through a COVID age. So for that reason, we think scores were lower last year with females. The only other thing I'd pick out, and it does look an anomaly to me, but the data is right. I talked at the start about the fact that 45 to 54-year-olds were by and large, and white males, unhappier than most of the groups. And that shows through in the scores between the UK and the USA more starkly than it does in the UK example. And then on the next slide, I've got ethnicity scores. And what you will see here is broken down by Asian employees, Black African, mixed multi-race and white, the scores between the UK and the USA. For Asian, Black African, Caribbean employees and for white employees, you'll see that the UK is higher. But for the mixed ethnic group, the USA is higher. They score 1.4% higher. So by and large, from an ethnicity point of view, there is a preference to high scores in the UK. Again, when you look at the report, because I haven't got time to go through it, what you'll be able to explore is the questions and in which areas these different groups are scoring higher in the UK and in the USA. And then on the next slide, and I'm conscious of my time, we've drawn data from those 1,200 plus employees of your organisations that have gone to work or completed the survey, and so we have data on the organisations. You'll see there are 2 of the 6 areas where BAB is scoring more highly, reward and recognition and well-being, but you're pretty close to the average through all the scores that we're seeing. On the next slide, you'll see that the biggest difference between BAB employees is not really between male and female, which are pretty close and not far off the global average. Not really in terms of age. You'll see the age spectrum there. But the thing that I would draw out before the ethnicity slide is that there is a very big gap between how managers are feeling and how non-management employees are feeling. We do see this, but we would normally expect to see globally, and when we look at other countries, as I say, we've got data on 120 countries, we would normally expect to see a 4 or 5 point gap. This is a 6.5 point gap. So there's something going on at the moment between management employees and non-management employees and how they're scoring in terms of their workplace happiness. And then the last slide I've got for you just pulls out for British American business how you're doing on race diversity. And what you'll see there is that Arab employees are scoring well below the average, Asian are higher, Black African are higher, and white employees are slightly lower. Now, that's good news in terms of the context of what we're talking about, but there is one caveat I'd give you about the score for the Black African Caribbean employees. What we find in BAE is that the survey responses are skewed towards Black managers, and what we know is that managers score far more highly. So it is a good story, but what I wouldn't want to do is to say that it doesn't come without a caveat. The last thing I just want to mention is what's happened since the shocking murder of George Floyd. What we see in our results, although there is this huge move pre and post COVID, what we're not seeing is anything around George Floyd and responses either before or after. But on COVID, what we are seeing is a big shift. So pre-COVID, workplace happiness was 65%, but it may surprise you to know the score is now 71%. It's gone up by 5.8%. It's gone up for men and it's gone up for women. So against what you might expect, workplace happiness is much higher post-COVID. On the next slide, what you'll see, and this is my final slide, is the pre and post COVID by each of those ethnicities. And the good news is that for Black, mixed race and white employees, as we've seen with the global figure, their happiness at work has gone up post COVID. And the highest increase is from mixed and multi-race, then white and then Black employees. There has been a drop in Asian employees who reported being happier in 2019 than they were in 2020. So from all of this, what I hope you'll be able to see from the report is there are some very specific areas where Black, mixed race, Asian and Arab employees are scoring less well. But by and large, what we've seen is a positive shift over the last year, which is encouraging. So I hope I've been able to distill that down for you in about 10 minutes. The report gives you much more information. If you have any more detailed questions, obviously we'd be delighted to answer them. And now I'm very happily going to hand you back to Tamara. Tamara, thank you.
Thanks so much, Mark. And we are thrilled that you will be able to stay with us and join our panel discussion. And so if anyone does have any questions for Mark, he will continue to stay with us. So now as we move into our panel and welcome our panelists, I'd first like to offer a very big thank you to our sponsor for today's session, ACCA, which is the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. And to facilitate our panel now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Sophia Khan, Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at Thomson Reuters. Sophia has previously held roles at 3M Company and Pepsi Americas in both D&I and HR business partner roles. She was the Vice President of Global Strategic Diversity and Inclusion at Wells Fargo. And immediately prior to joining Thomson Reuters, Sophia led Global Inclusion, Diversity and Engagement at Medtronic. Sophia, pleasure to have you, and over to you.
Thanks so much for having me, Tamara. And Mark, I swear I need to pick your brain. I was taking copious notes, and so thank you for doing the research, right? This is really important. And so the panel that we have today is really, I'm excited. But before we dive in, a few kind of housekeeping, if you will. I see some of you using the chat. I would encourage you to do so. We will have roughly 40 minutes together. You will be in listen-only mode during the panel. We will do a Q&A, and we'd love for you to come off mic, come off mute and ask your questions, and definitely submit them in the chat. And anything we don't get to, I definitely will try to help summarize with the team here to try to get back to all of you, because there's so much to cover, right? So I want to introduce our panelists. Obviously, you've had the opportunity to hear from Lord Mark Price and this amazing research. We also have 3 other individuals, so I will call on each one of you to introduce yourselves in just a moment. So we have Enoch Adai-Yami, who is the founder of Black Professionals Scotland. We also have Stella Essog, who is the co-founder of Impact Consultancy, and that's an EM, capital EM, PACT. So I'd love to hear more. And then Siobhan Pandia, who's the Senior Director of Business Assurance and Excellence at Mary Kay and a Global Council member of the ACCA. So welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for being with us. I have so many notes. As I shared, as we prepared, as I was preparing, where do we start? And what's interesting that I'd be curious before we dive in, one, let's introduce yourselves. And then just so to get you thinking, I'm gonna ask you, where do you see the intersectionality of the work that Mark has presented to us with the work that you are currently doing? I think there's an opportunity there to address that. So Enoch, maybe we can start with you with your introduction.
Hi everyone, my name is Enoch Adeyemi, and so based out in Scotland. I'm an accountant by day, so I'm a member of ACCA, the sponsors of the event, and I'm also the founder of Black Professionals Scotland, which is a networking group that was founded back in 2016, but has gained, should I say, more notoriety post George Floyd, and it's essentially to support Black professionals and students in Scotland.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm looking at my screen, so Siobhan, I'll go to you next.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Siobhan Pandia. I'm based here in Dallas, Texas, in the US. I am the Senior Director of Business Assurance and Excellence for Mary Kay, a skincare and cosmetics company who, for those of you that are familiar with the company, was founded by a 50-plus, woman over 54 years ago. And so, we are very much living and breathing what we're talking about here and what we heard about in Lord Price's report. So excited to be able to talk to you about, how the company is run and how we are able to kind of embrace what's going on right now with many of the challenges we're facing.
Wonderful, thank you. And Stella.
Hi, I'm Stella Essog. By day, I'm an accountant as well. I'm also a member of ACCA. On the side, I have Impact Consultancy, which I co-founded. We are D&I consultants, and we look at really in the space of how Black people and Black neurodivergent people are affected in the workplace. So it'll be really interesting to sort of dig deeper into that in today's conversation.
Wonderful. Lord Mark Price, anything you'd like to add to your introduction? Oh, you're on mute.
On mute, I know, I'm on mute. No, I think I've had the floor more than enough, but I'm happy at an appropriate time to answer questions.
No, listen, I've got to ask. So let's get started. The term I used as we were beginning this was intersectionality, which I know is kind of that buzzword, hot topic. But when I look at, I'm a big, so to give everybody context, I'm a big data person, but coupled with then what do you do? What's the action? What's the impact you're trying to drive? So based on the research, if I may put you on the spot, maybe Enoch, I'll start with you. How do you see the research and what have you seen? So you've all heard what Mark presented. What are you seeing kind of in your work, in your network as well, around the topics that Lord Mark Price has presented to us?
Yep. No, a lot of surprises. There was a similar research or work done in Scotland specifically, because my focus is on Scotland. I think last year by Edinburgh University, again around race and intersectionality, and how various groups of people are impacted, and across the research, maybe not 100%, but in most parts of the research, what we're finding is the most negatively impacted group are Black women in the area of opportunities to jobs, and then when they get into jobs, opportunities for career advancement. I think in most cases, Black ethnic minority or African American, you call it in the US, are usually very impacted by, should I say, discrimination, injustice, and lack of opportunity in the workplace. But then their female or our female counterparts are the most affected. And I'm sure there are other areas of intersectionality, but maybe I'll let Stella pick up on that, considering our impact and consultancy looks at a wider range of issues.
Wonderful, thank you. Stella.
Thanks, Enoch. Yeah, so I echo what Enoch just said in regards to what we found is that, so in the UK, in most areas, Black people seem to be the ones that are most at a disadvantage. When I say that, it's because in regards to the term that we use in the UK, we use a term called BAME, which is Black, Asian and Minority Ethnics. And usually when they're referring to sort of like D&I issues, that term is used really broadly. But what we found is that in that term, Black people tend to be the ones that are affected the most compared to the Asian counterparts and the other ethnic minorities. So that's sort of one of the reasons why my work focuses on that. And following up from what Enoch just said, myself, the one reason why I started Impact is because, number one, I'm a Black woman and I'm dyslexic as well. So all of those things have caused a number of barriers into the workplace. And that's kind of like what a lot of the research that we found. So we found that although there's barriers to Black people, there's further barriers when you're female, and there's further barriers when you have any hidden disability. So a lot of the research that we've done, we found that. And in regards to some of the things that Mark just went through, in regards to the happiness of people that in management and non-management, what we found is that in the UK, there's not a lot of Black senior leadership. So I think the recent stat I saw was 1.5% across the UK in public and private sector of Black people are actually in leadership positions. Another one I saw was in regards to, in the last 62 years, there's only been 15 Black CEOs across the Fortune 500 companies. So it's showing that, so some of the issues that people are having is because that they're not happy in the workplace because they cannot progress to the senior roles in regards to Black people. So that was some of the key things that I picked up when I was hearing Mark's presentation.
No, thank you for that. Again, it's kind of that, again, it's the word that I'm throwing in, but it's, that intersectionality, that's real, right? What you just stated, that CEO, right? So when you think about companies and tone at the top and representation, right, there's a reason why that matters. And I'm curious, Siobhan, one, in response to the research, the same question I asked both Enoch and Stella, well, what are you seeing in your work at Mary Kay from intersectionality or the data, et cetera?
I think when we talk about the report, absolutely, I think we're generally seeing those themes across, most corporations in the US. I think where our industry or my industry, which is the beauty industry, differs is that I think there's always been an element of D&I. It's been required in order to sell the products. And I think what we've seen in the last year with George Floyd and everything that's come after that is actually the beauty industry is one industry where you've seen probably much more significant change. I would say if you look at the companies across the globe, we're seeing, an increase in Black-owned brands, right? We're seeing an increase in support for Black-owned brands. So a company like Target, which is a national retailer here, they're picking up and they're sponsoring those brands, and they're there as soon as you walk in the store. We're also seeing an increase in kind of, Black or ethnic minority brand ambassadors. So for example, if you are familiar with Tracee Ellis Ross, she's the daughter of Diana Ross, who I'm sure most people know. She's now the D&I advisor to Ulta Beauty. So what you're actually seeing in the beauty industry is that there's always been or always needed to be an element of D&I, but that's been hugely escalated with what's happened in the last year. You're also seeing, large companies working to empower women. So we talked about empowerment being really important to happiness, not only in the workplace, I think, but, going as far back as when you're at university as well. So you're seeing the likes of an Estee Lauder partnering up with Howard University to make sure that they are empowering students there, and particularly those from ethnic minorities and from the Black community. You're also seeing, L'Oreal now partnering up with the NCAACP to say, okay, what can we do to be able to support small businesses and startups, again, from ethnic minorities, but predominantly from the Black community. So I think the beauty industry is one area where you've actually seen what's happened in the last year have the impact that we needed it to have, because you're seeing much more drive in those areas. I will touch on another point, because we talked about, obviously you referenced it as BAME. One of the things for me personally is that heading of Asian, because when you think of Asian, there's actually a lot more slicing and dicing, for lack of a better term, that you can do within there. Because if I think of what I see in the US right now, and Asians, if you are from, China, Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, they are seeing discrimination because of what's happened with COVID over the last year, whether that's discrimination on a day-to-day basis with service at a restaurant or in a store, to career progression or even entering the workforce. If you're then talking about, Asians from Pakistan, Bangladesh, since 9/11, they've been, suffering discrimination. I come from a population which is, my background is Indian, but originally from Scotland. So I reference myself as a British Indian American. We are probably one of the groups that's felt the least discrimination. And we've actually thrived, partly because, we've always had higher education rates. We're typically in the white collar jobs. And now with the Biden administration, if you kind of look across that administration, you're seeing a huge surge in Indian Americans there. So I think when we reference even Asian Americans or Asians across the globe, we need to get a little bit more granular with that, because there's different levels of how, workplace happiness and life happiness is affecting those different groups.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. I'm listening intently because, there's so many directions we could go. And it's interesting because I think we talked when we prepared that I have a similar experience where I was born in London. My family moved to the States, but I'm of South Asian descent. I'm Indian and Pakistani. And what I experienced as a little girl in England, although my heart is very much, my friends in England joke like, oh, you still think you're British, huh? But you sound American. But is, being on the playground and being teased because there are very derogatory comments made to South Asians and Indian and Pakistanis, whether it's cuisine, the way we look, the way we speak, the way we dress. And then moving to the States, it was almost like I was invisible until 9/11 because I'm Muslim. So it's this interesting kind of almost hidden experience of bias and racism. It's not as maybe overt, but then COVID, as you shared, I was just reading an article, unfortunately, and the news, as I keep up with the news, I'm at Thomson Reuters, is, Chinatowns. So the violence and what's happening in our Chinatowns in the United States is really grim. And so communities are hurting. So let's go into community for just a moment. And we're going to go back and forth a little bit to all the participants. I think we've got, I'm seeing about just over 100 participants. I want to talk a little bit about centrists, and I even bite my tongue with George Floyd, meaning I live in Minneapolis. So just for some context, and I shared with this team that my kids and I were very moved to the memorial. We spent a lot of time volunteering. very involved in the community. And so the 17-year-old that captured the video of George Floyd, and everybody, you know, I preface this with not the company, but in my words, killing, murder, okay, death. What have you seen? Do you feel that in the minute that video went viral, it went across the world? So what have you seen? Is it different? Is doing the work of racial justice and equality and working against bias different post May 25th? Or is it the same? Or what are you seeing? So I'm really curious, maybe Mark, could we start with you? Because I'm curious from the research, I know you said that you're not seeing a direct correlation, but even in conversation, what are you seeing?
So the very first thing, can I just pick up on Stella's point? And I think Enoch
Please.
well. What you see when you get into our report is that it's Black women who feel sort of most disenfranchised. So Black men score more highly, but all the points that you made about career development and women getting to work, they're so right. I mean, that really shines through in a negative way in the report. Sorry, can you just repeat the question to me?
Yeah, it was kind of a loaded, long, but basically what I'm asking is this, is if you think about, and I'm even hesitant to say post George Floyd, so there's a pre-May 25th in the work that I do in diversity, inclusion, racial equity, and there's a pre and post May 25th. Yeah. Has anything changed?
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Sophia. So no, our research shows no. We measured pre and post COVID. So we measured from February 19, and then we measured again now, and there's a big move. I mean, people are happier. We measured either side of the George Floyd murder. There's no difference. The scores are pretty well the same. They're being driven by other things. But I would say so the way I would say that there is a change is that we do lots of work with companies, and we survey lots of different things. And we have been asked over the last 4 months, to do more work on measuring D&I than we've ever been asked to do before. And it comes back to this thing you mentioned, I thought really eloquently, Sophia, when you were saying, you know, you're data driven. You've got to be data driven first. And then when you've got the data, and we've heard some great examples from people on the panel saying, you know, here are some really hard examples. When you've got those, you can improve. So what we're seeing at the moment, I think, is a thirst for knowledge that we haven't seen before. It's only after you've got that you'll start to do the work to say, look, there are these specific areas. I hate averages. You know, if your head's in the oven and your feet are in the fridge, you're an average temperature. And so when I always do these presentations, you see an average of 26,000 people. The real beauty of the data is when you distill it down and you say Black women in X feel Y, and that's what really allows you to make big steps. So people often say, I don't think there's a silver bullet that will change things. I think it's organizations looking in detail at how their people are feeling and then putting together responses for the individuals, not just saying, if we did X, all of a sudden it's going to be better tomorrow. Although I do agree with Stella, I think that, you know, the level that we have of participation of Black people on boards in the UK, I can't speak for America, is not good. It's nowhere near it should be. The percentage is much lower than the percentage of Black people working in the UK. And we've still got that issue with women. I mean, it's gone forward with women, but we've still not got 30% of women on boards in the UK. So it's still an issue, but what gives me hope and encouragement is that people now have a real thirst for knowledge in a way that I don't think they had 6-8 months ago.
I think that's such a great way to put it, thirst of knowledge, right? Stella, do you mind if I go to you for a moment, just because Mark referenced you, but also curious, what are you seeing? So if we pull that theme for just a moment, the thirst of knowledge, what is that thirst of knowledge? Like, because I also agree with you, Mark, the granularity of the data is really important, not just the top line, but what's really happening. So Stella, I'm just curious, what are you seeing? What are you doing? What can you share?
So I agree with everything that Mark's just said. I like thirst of knowledge because one of the key things that I've seen is that there are now So there's a lot of organisations doing tenders to get people in to actually review their D&I. So similar to what, kind of like what Mark was saying. So more and more people want to do D&I consultations. There are now there are a lot more conversations going on, and we're comfortable having these conversations. So a lot of organisations are trying to set up race committees, steering board, advisory groups within their organisation, so we can actually have this conversation. I think what it's done is empowered employees to actually be able to now talk about their experiences, whereas in the past we felt that we couldn't say much because people might just say, oh, you know, it's a woe me kind of situation. But as the George Floyd incident happened, then it was sort of like this light was shone on the situation, and it wasn't only looked at, okay, what's happening in sort of like authorities and with the police, is like actually what's happening in the workplace, what other areas are people depending on their race are they being disadvantaged? So in the workplace, that was a key thing. So what we've seen is that a lot more conversations have happened. More people are more open to hearing what we have to say. A lot of organisations are actually feeling like they have to do something. However, as Mark said, because they're doing a lot of this data collection exercise at the moment, we haven't seen any outcomes. We haven't seen the impact of what they're doing. And one thing that we don't want to see is that we don't want it to be lip service. We don't want it to look like, okay, we seem to be doing something. Let's get in consultant, let's do this piece of work so it looks like we're actually trying to participate. But actually what happens is that nothing's actioned, or things are actioned, but they haven't taken into consideration actually doing things at a grassroots level to finding out, okay, how can we actually address these issues, address the root cause issues? And that's sort of one of the things that I'm afraid of, because I've seen a lot of organisations reach out to us and they kind of want to go this far, but they don't want to go all the way here. And that's what I'm a bit worried about, because it's been good that now there's been this thirst, there's been this hunger. A lot of people are now talking about things and seeing the actual disparities, but it's what happens next. So it's kind of early to say, but I'm hoping that there will be real change.
No, I think it's interesting. I'm already hearing some themes from the conversation, right? You know, the thirst of knowledge, and there's a level of empowerment because there's a voice to what has been happening. Unfortunate voice, if you will, right? But needed. So I'm wondering, Siobhan, what are your thoughts regarding what are you seeing and experiencing kind of pre-post, if you will, that marker of May 25th?
Yeah, I mean, I think Stella made a great point about the voices. So I think where, you know, organizations feel more comfortable asking the questions and almost need to ask the questions. Hopefully it's because they genuinely want to do something to make a difference rather than just to be seen to be asked that question. But I've also seen a shift in the answering of the questions. You know, for example, in our organization, but even amongst friends, I've seen a lot more of my you know, Black peers and Black friends come forward and say, I want you to ask me about this. I want you to ask the uncomfortable questions because this is an opportunity to educate. So, you know, going back to your comment about thirst of knowledge is, let me explain to you how it makes me feel. Let me explain to you how you can help. And I think we've seen much more, we've seen a louder voice from the Black community, you know, obviously after May 25th than ever before, but also an increased comfort level at having those really, really difficult conversations, which may not have happened in the workplace previously. So I think that's been a huge shift that I've seen. I do, you know, echo what Stella said about a concern. Where is it just being done to tick a box, right? So I sit on a charity called First Candle. We're a nationwide charity that focuses on reducing SIDS and other types of infant death. And over the years, we've focused in on, okay, where is the largest, you know, kind of help needed, or where's the biggest struggle? And it's with Black mothers who don't get the same level of healthcare. They're not getting the same level of attention either when they're pregnant or after they have their kids. And so, you know, African Americans, Black women have the highest mortality rate for themselves and for their babies in the first year. And so, you know, what we're doing is we're reaching out to governments and to the government, and to local authorities and saying, this is what's happening in your area. Here's what you can do to help. And the response we're getting is, some of it is, well, that's really interesting. That's good information. What we're not seeing yet is taking it over the finish line, which is, okay, what are you going to do about it? because, you know, the more help that these women get, whether it's in their health, the health of their baby, that's going to eventually also translate into the workforce, which is part of what we're trying to talk about, helping them, you know, have a good job, find the right healthcare, find the right daycare, all of those type of things. So, you know, what we're seeing is that the conversation has started, but it's going to be so important to get over the finish line, and we're not seeing that yet. We're not seeing that.
I think that's a very interesting and I think, again, succinct way. It's like there's a spectrum, thirst of knowledge, data, right? Definitely, I would say I'm experiencing that with my colleagues in the diversity and inclusion space, but also at Thomson Reuters, where, you know, having conversations, always having conversations, but actually having conversations, dare I say, that are meaningful, that matter, that are eye-opening for some and not so eye-opening for others, but are hopefully it's the catalyst. And so what I'm curious about, you know, and certainly feel free to answer that last question and please share, but I'm also curious, you know, kind of the double click on that, or the next question is, so what do we do, right? What's working, what's not working? Like, how do we get, and to me, it's like, whether you call it finish line, but how do we get, it's like up and over the hump of, ooh, do we go that far? Do we not?
Yeah, so just a quick point on the last question, looking at it from a different perspective. So with George Floyd, even though Lord Price's report says, doesn't specifically show significant movement pre and post George Floyd. What I've seen, and I think everyone will agree, is there's now an open conversation around inequality. So we're not just talking about Black inequality, we're talking about gender inequality, we're talking about sexuality, we're talking about mental health. So it's all up for grabs now. Everybody is out there making their noise, which is good. Before, everyone was quiet because it wasn't okay to talk about it. So that's one thing George Floyd has. He's opened the floodgates. I was having a joke with my wife yesterday, and I was telling her, thank God for George Floyd. And I'm sure a lot of people are saying that it's unfortunate George Floyd died, but he has opened up a lot of doors for a lot of us. To answer your question, Sophia, with regards to what can be done. So in the UK, Lloyds Banking Group, which is one of the biggest banks here in the UK, recently released their ethnicity pay gap, which what that then does is it begins to drive actions, because if you put that kind of data out there, then folks are your investors, those that are putting money in your organization are going to be asking you, what are you doing about it? So hopefully now that Lloyds Banking Group has started that, we're hoping other companies will follow. What I would really like to see, and this is a bit extreme, again, I'll link it to something else. Back in the 50s, it was okay to be racist. And the reason why a lot of people are no longer racist is because there's a law against being racist. So I would suggest, as far as putting targets, I think this, I may be wrong, but maybe there's currently something similar to that in the United States. But I think target drives actions, because when we have these conversations, the pushback is, where can we find, so focusing on the Black side of things, where can we find the Black talents, where can we find the Black skills? But once you start putting those targets there and you expect companies to meet those targets in 5-10 years, they will start doing things now to meet those targets. So what do I mean? So I'm talking about things like internships, getting early, with the early careers, getting the young kids into the place of work, and then not just getting them into the place of work, giving them the environment for them to thrive. So something Lord Price mentioned around information sharing, I picked up on that, because the Black ethnic minority people scored lower than that. And one of the reasons why I think they scored lower than that is information that will empower and get people promoted and get them to the top of their career doesn't get shared with Black people. It's just because it's a white boys club. John tells Paul, or John picks Paul. But once those quotas or those targets are set, and it's set in law, or I don't know which way it's going to be set, then organizations will start doing the right thing from the grassroots to make sure they meet that expectation. And it's not the case that there's no skill set. Again, as Lord Price said, a lot of these Black ethnic minority people didn't complain that they didn't have the necessary skills. So they are educated. So education is not the problem, skills is not the problem, it's just the opportunity and the, trusting them, again, picking up on Lord Price's point around trusted to make decisions. It's that issue we've experienced here in Scotland, and we have experienced it personally, your managers don't see you as someone that can be trusted to make a decision. Hence, they don't put you in a place of authority, e.g., a managerial position. So they can promote you all you want, but when it gets to that point where you have to make decisions, they find it hard. I don't know why. So a lot of what Lord Price's report said was just, bang on. So anyway, to answer the question, quotas, just put quotas there and people will do the right thing, and that will solve most of the problem. Albeit quotas are not they're not popular, they're not sexy, but sometimes you just need to go extreme to solve a problem.
It's interesting when you think about US, UK, the role that I'm in, and I have been in a global space for almost 30 years. And, I've always worked for global companies. And the one thing that I consistently see, right, is the importance of a metric, the importance of a baseline, the importance that it provides in terms of guidance, right? The research. On the flip side, it's the accountability. Where's the accountability? And I feel like, what you're getting to is, what is the real accountability? What is measurable? It's almost like, if I'm going to be an American, it's like, I'm terrible with American colloquialisms, by the way, but, what is it? Where the rubber hits the road, that kind of a thing, meaning where the buck stops. There's all these things, but truly what you're getting at enough is accountability. And so what I'm curious about for all of you, and also I want to let the audience know, we're going to be going to Q&A. So please put your questions in the chat, get them ready. We're ready for you. So the last question I'll ask, because we have to try and wrap this portion up so quickly, how do you drive accountability? And Enoch, I think you're getting to, right, in the US, we have affirmative action, we do have laws. In the UK, there are laws, there's disability mandates in different countries. Right? There are some mechanisms, but where are the gaps? What do we need to do to either manage up and or impact the level of accountability that's needed? And I may not have the right question there, so please take it where you want. Maybe, Mark, I'll come to you.
So I think that Enoch's point is really good about transparency and targets. That was introduced for women in the UK a number of years ago. So targets about the number of women on board. You have to report the pay gap for women and men. I think that will inevitably happen around ethnicity. And I think that would be, broadly speaking, a good thing. A lot of people were nervous about women, but now it's become part and parcel of what we do. So I think that would be good. I've always been a great believer in role models. There's a wonderful Black woman in the UK called Floella Benjamin. And I got to know Floella really well. And I was very conscious in Waitrose we weren't as good as we should be about 10 years ago when I was running Waitrose. And I brought her in and we set up a committee just to look at this issue. And one of the things that she recommended, which I'd never thought of, she said, ask people from ethnic minorities to come to a board meeting and get them to sit at the board and get them afterwards to write a report. And then in our internal journal, they talk about their views and they will go back and it will inspire them. And it was such a simple idea, but it was so powerful, so incredibly powerful. So I think that the points I've already made about transparency and setting benchmarks, I think about data and really understanding. And I think that role models are so important.
Yeah, that's why representation matters. So when people are thinking, so this is the tricky slope, right? It's, we need goals. So I will say at Thomson Reuters, we do have goals. We have a Black representation goal. We have a racial and ethnic goal. We have a female goal. And we look at all of that globally. And in fact, we have been digging into self-identification, because a lot of our data and how we know who our employees are is through voluntary self-identification. So we're actually stripping apart how employees can go in and self-ID, sexuality, disability, gender identity, and really looking at by country. So it's actually kind of, and it's been rough work, but if we're going to really understand what is needed, we really have to start peeling back the dimensions of diversity. I'd like to go to maybe Siobhan and Stella, and then we've got to get to the Q&A. So I think I'm getting the nudge here, or the music will start playing. Siobhan and Stella, what would you like to share?
I think I'll just add, we're seeing the establishment, I'll talk to the beauty industry. We're seeing the establishment of some of those goals that you mentioned, especially around gender, and it's being driven by actually the UN's sustainable development goals, because there is a goal specifically in there about, female representation and things like that. So I think you're seeing companies start to establish those goals, but it's going to come back to your key point of accountability. So not only are organizations establishing those goals, they're now communicating them out. We've heard from, not just the beauty industry, but the UPSs, the FedExes, the Amazons of the world, what their targets are in that space. But what's going to happen in 5-6 years if they haven't met their target, right? That's going to be the important piece is, well, will things just continue? And it's like, well, we got pretty close and that's okay. Or is it going to be up to us as consumers, right, to say, okay, well, this was a really important target and getting close enough is not good enough. And therefore, we're going to change our behaviors and our buying patterns. So you're starting to see the establishment of goals, but you haven't seen a clear plan for how that accountability is going to be in place. And that we're going to see over the next kind of 5-10 years.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. Stella.
The only thing I wanted to add, it was just in regards to actually how organizations go about achieving those goals. I feel like having these goals in place is good, but it's about their approach. I feel like currently what's happening now is that organizations are not consulting with the right type of organization to enforce these things. So it's really about talking to grassroots organizations like my organization, Enox organization, to actually understand what are the key things that need to be in place in workplaces to change that culture, have that cultural shift to actually really enforce change. So I just think that it's good that we have these things in place, but I think one of the key things we need to look about is approach and strategy. We're using the same type of mechanism that we used in the past, then change is not really going to happen. And notice that a lot of organizations, they put a lot of emphasis on setting up in-house advisory groups with Black employees or whatever employees they're trying to focus on. And it's almost putting a lot of pressure on those individuals to make that change. It's getting the views is important, but it's also really important in getting the experts out that have done research and work into these areas to ensure that the actual changes are actually going to come into place to really make a long-term effect.
No, I agree, Stella.
Can I quickly add something, Sophia,
please, go ahead.
or are we out of time?
No, please go ahead, please.
Yep. I don't think any of us woke up today thinking I'm going to discriminate against a disabled person or an Asian person or a Black person. So I think innately we are all good people, and people that work for organizations, whatever the organization is, are generally good people. So when organizations are thinking of diversity or Black diversity, whatever kind of diversity it is, so let's pick Black women, for example. Say, okay, why are we not getting Black women into the organization, and why are Black women not progressing? Or as someone said in the group, why are Arabic men or Arabic women not progressing? It's then looking at the structures in place in that organization. Like, what's your hiring policy? What's your promotion policy? Is those, looking at the things in place, the machinery of the organization, to start unpicking it, to find why are Black people why are Black women not applying, or why are they not doing well at interviews, and then you can start answering those questions, and hopefully you can start solving that problem. Because genuinely, nobody wants to be racist or wants to discriminate or wants to hold down anybody in particular. It's just the way the system is set up such that just happens without any particular person doing it.
I think what you just mentioned, I think between Enoch and Stella, as we conclude this portion, and sorry, my phone is, I moved my phone, is, okay, there's accountability with data, et cetera, but it's the systemic or systematic, right? Depending how you look at it in terms of, we've been doing this a long time. This isn't new. And with the unfortunate killing of George Floyd, suddenly, I will tell you, in my world, overnight, it went from pushing and pushing, right, to just, what are we going to do? How soon is now? And so the actions coupled with the accountability and really dissecting how we make decisions. So for me, I'm providing a little bias and under the tent is I will say through my work at Thomson Reuters and in the local community in Minneapolis that I live in, as we fight towards racial equality, is what are the systems? What are the laws? to your pointing out, what is that intersectionality? Where do we really lift off and turn that conversation into some real impactful action? I know that I'm getting the official please move on, right? But I will share, first of all, thank you all. This is always a learning. Let me tell you, no matter how many times I either sit in a panel, watch a panel, moderate, I learn. So thank you all for taking the time and for being so thoughtful. So with that, we're going to open up questions, and I'm curious.
Sophia, I'm sorry, I think we're actually just about out of time now. I know, I can't believe it either, but we've actually reached
you
our
gave
hour.
Me the 2-minute one.
Reached our hour mark. And I do want to be sensitive to everyone's, all of our attendees' time. I mean, that said, I hope that if our panelists are open to it, we can share your information and then, filter any questions, any follow-up questions your way. But I did just want to say a huge thank you, Sophia, to you for taking us through a lot of hard topics and questions. So thank you, and thank you to Stella and Siobhan and Enoch, and of course, Mark, thank you for kind of giving us the important data, the structure to kind of have this conversation. And I'm sorry we don't have more time. I think next time we need to book more than an hour.
I was like, we might need a part 2. I'm just, because people need to talk. So
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I missed that, Mark. Whoops.
Well, no, I mean, and to be fair, we probably should do a part 2. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all for tuning in, and please join us on International Women's Day on March 8th for our program then. So thank you again, and have a good one.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome, Duncan. Great to see you.
Yeah, you well?
Yeah, I mean, good form, actually. Yeah, I mean, I'll be pleased when this third lockdown ends. And I think the UK government have gone from being stupidly optimistic to now stupidly pessimistic. But
we're still broadcasting, so we'll pick this up.
I think we have 35 people left. Mark, my new friend. My new friend.
I'll put a slot in your calendar for a quick catch up.
Yeah, no, I'd like that.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Lovely to meet
you.
everybody. Please stay connected. Please.
Yeah. You too.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
all.